They said I would never walk again. The words echoed in my mind like a death sentence, bouncing off the sterile hospital walls and lodging themselves deep in my chest where they festered like an open wound. The fluorescent lights above my bed hummed with cruel indifference as I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in each one, desperately trying to focus on anything except the devastating reality that had just shattered my world into a million irreparable pieces. The doctor had delivered the news with clinical detachment, his voice devoid of emotion as he explained how the impact had compressed my vertebrae, how the fragments had damaged my spinal cord, how the swelling had created pressure that might never fully subside. He used words like incomplete injury and limited sensation, as if these medical terms could somehow soften the blow of what he was really telling me. You will never walk again. The specialist who came the next day was even more direct. She pulled up my X-rays on a glowing screen, pointing to the jagged lines and dark spaces that represented the ruins of my spine. Her finger traced the damage with practiced precision as she explained the extent of the trauma, the likelihood of permanent paralysis, the need to adjust expectations, and prepare for a new normal. You will never walk again. But it was Josh who delivered the most devastating blow of all. My fiancé of 2 years, the man who had promised to love me in sickness and in health, who had slipped an engagement ring on my finger just 6 months earlier while we watched the sunset from our favorite hiking trail. The man I had planned to marry in just 8 months, who had helped me pick out the perfect venue, who had tasted cake samples with me and laughed at my indecision between vanilla and chocolate. He sat beside my hospital bed on the 3rd day after the accident, his hands fidgeting with the baseball cap he always wore when he was nervous. His eyes could not meet mine as he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper as he delivered the words that would haunt me for years to come. I just cannot picture a life pushing someone in a wheelchair forever. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt something inside me break that had nothing to do with bones or vertebrae or damaged nerve endings. This was a different kind of fracture, one that cut through my heart and left me bleeding in ways the doctors could never repair. He left without saying goodbye, just stood up, placed his cap on his head, and walked out of my room with the steady, confident gait of someone whose legs worked perfectly. I watched him go, memorizing the way his shoulders moved, the sound of his footsteps on the linoleum floor, the soft click of the door closing behind him. That was the last time I saw him for 5 years. The crash had not been my fault. The police report would later confirm what I already knew, that I had been driving through a green light when another driver, distracted by his phone, ran the red light at full speed. His SUV had slammed into the driver's side of my small sedan with enough force to send my car spinning across 3 lanes of traffic before it finally came to rest against a concrete barrier. I remembered fragments of those moments. The screech of tires on asphalt. The explosive sound of metal crushing metal. The way my body had been thrown against the door, then whipped back across the seat. The taste of blood in my mouth and the strange, distant sound of my own voice screaming. Then darkness. When I woke up in the hospital, everything was different. The world looked the same, but I could not feel half of my body. My legs lay motionless beneath the thin hospital blanket, unresponsive to my desperate mental commands. I tried to wiggle my toes, to bend my knees, to feel anything at all below my waist, but there was nothing. Just an empty, hollow sensation where my lower body used to be. The doctors explained that the impact had shattered my T12 vertebra, sending bone fragments into my spinal cord. 2 ribs were broken, my left arm was fractured, and I had suffered a severe concussion. But it was the spinal injury that changed everything. The injury that stole my ability to walk, to run, to dance, to live the life I had always taken for granted. I spent hours staring at the ceiling of my hospital room, counting the holes in the acoustic tiles above my bed. There were 1,247 holes in the tile directly above my head. I knew because I had counted them 17 times. It was easier to focus on meaningless numbers than to confront the terrifying reality of my new existence. The physical therapy sessions began 2 weeks after the accident. The therapist, a kind woman named Sarah with graying hair and gentle hands, explained that we would work on building upper body strength, on learning to transfer from the bed to a wheelchair, on adapting to my new circumstances. She spoke in encouraging tones about independence and mobility options, but I could hear the unspoken truth beneath her words. This was not about getting better. This was about learning to live broken. The first time they moved me to a wheelchair, I cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears of someone processing grief, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone whose world had just collapsed. I wept for the hikes I would never take, for the dancing I would never do, for the wedding I would never have. I mourned the loss of my independence, my identity, my future. But somewhere in the depths of that despair, something else began to grow. A tiny spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. As I sat in that wheelchair, looking at my lifeless legs, I made a decision that would change everything. This was not the end of my story. This was just the intermission. Recovery was not pretty. It was not inspiring or uplifting or any of the things you see in movies. It was brutal and messy and filled with more pain than I had ever imagined possible. I screamed during physical therapy sessions when the therapists moved my legs through range of motion exercises. I cried when I could not lift my leg even an inch off the table. I threw up from the pain of electrical stimulation treatments that were supposed to help maintain muscle tone. But with every brutal session, every small victory, every devastating setback, I held on to one image. One dream that kept me going when everything else seemed hopeless. My wedding day. A long, shimmering aisle stretching out before me. And me, walking down it in a flowing white dress, not rolled or pushed, but walking on my own 2 feet. The image was so vivid I could feel the smooth fabric of the dress against my skin. Could hear the music playing. Could see the faces of everyone who had doubted me watching in stunned silence as I proved them all wrong. The months blurred together in a haze of appointments and treatments and small, incremental improvements. I learned to transfer from my wheelchair to the bed, to navigate curbs and doorways, to build strength in muscles I had never thought about before. I endured countless procedures and injections, experimental treatments that promised hope, but delivered only modest improvements. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about my progress, but they continued to emphasize that I should not expect to walk again. They spoke of partial sensation and limited function as significant victories, and I suppose they were right. Many people with injuries like mine never regained even that much. But I wanted more. I demanded more. I refused to accept that this was as good as it would get. It was during one of my rehabilitation sessions that I met Liam. He was a physical therapist specializing in spinal cord injuries, recently transferred to our facility from a hospital in another state. Where other therapists had approached my case with careful optimism, Liam brought something different. He brought belief. I have seen people with injuries like yours walk again. He told me during our first session together. It is not common, and it is not easy, but it is possible. The question is, how badly do you want it? I looked at him with tears streaming down my face and said, I want it more than I want to breathe. He smiled, and something in his expression told me he understood. Not the polite professional understanding of a healthcare provider, but the deep personal understanding of someone who had fought his own battles and emerged victorious. Liam pushed me harder than anyone had before. He introduced new exercises, new techniques, new ways of thinking about my injury and my recovery. He talked about neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to rewire itself, about the importance of visualization and positive thinking in physical healing. But more than that, he believed in me. When I could not move my toes, he told me to keep trying. When I could not feel the electrical stimulation in my legs, he adjusted the settings and tried again. When I wanted to quit, he reminded me of my goal. Tell me about your wedding day, he would say when I was struggling through a particularly difficult session. Tell me about walking down that aisle. And I would describe it in detail, the dress, the music, the flowers, the moment when I would take my first steps toward my future husband. Liam would listen intently, nodding as if he could see it too. And then he would push me to try just a little harder. Months passed. Then a year. My progress was slow but steady. I regained some sensation in my legs, could move my toes slightly, could bear weight on my feet with the help of parallel bars. The doctors were amazed by my improvement, but they still cautioned against expecting too much. You have made remarkable progress, my neurologist told me during one of my regular checkups. But we need to be realistic about what is possible. You may regain some function, but independent walking is still highly unlikely. I nodded politely, but inside I was screaming. They did not understand. They could not see what I saw every night when I closed my eyes, myself walking down that aisle, proving everyone wrong, showing the world that impossible was just a word that people use when they had given up. It was around this time that Liam and I began spending time together outside of our therapy sessions. What started as professional consultations over coffee gradually evolved into something more personal. He would pick me up after my appointments, and we would drive to a quiet park where we could talk without the clinical atmosphere of the hospital. He told me about his own journey into physical therapy, how he had been inspired by his younger sister, who had overcome a traumatic brain injury. I shared my fears about the future, my anger at Josh for abandoning me, my determination to prove everyone wrong. "You do not need to prove anything to anyone," Liam said one evening as we watched the sunset from his car. "You are already remarkable just as you are." But I shook my head. I need to do this. Not for them, but for me. I need to know that I did not give up, that I fought for every step, that I refused to accept limitations that other people tried to put on me. He reached over and took my hand. "Then I will be there with you every step of the way." Our relationship developed slowly, carefully. Liam was professional enough to never cross boundaries during our therapy sessions, but outside of the hospital, he became my closest friend, my confidant, my biggest supporter. He understood my drive to recover in a way that no one else could, and he never made me feel like I was being unrealistic or obsessive about my goals. 2 years after the accident, I could stand with assistance. 3 years after, I could take a few steps using parallel bars. The progress was measured in inches and seconds, but each small victory felt like climbing a mountain. It was during my 4th year of recovery that Liam proposed. We were in the rehabilitation gym after hours, working on a new exercise routine he had designed specifically for me. I had just managed to walk 10 feet using only forearm crutches, a personal best that had left me exhausted but elated. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice unusually nervous. I looked up from where I was sitting on the exercise mat, catching my breath. He was kneeling beside me, and for a moment I thought he was going to help me with another exercise. Then I saw the small velvet box in his hands. "I fell in love with you when you still could not stand," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I watched you fight for every inch of progress, saw you refuse to give up even when everyone else said it was impossible. You are the strongest person I have ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams and celebrating your victories." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "You do not need to walk to be my wife. But if you do decide to walk down that aisle, I will be waiting at the end of it." I said yes through tears of joy, and he slipped the ring onto my finger right there on the gym floor. It was not the proposal I had imagined when I was with Josh, but it was perfect because it was real and honest and came from someone who loved me exactly as I was. We planned our wedding for the following year, giving me time to continue my recovery and hopefully achieve my goal of walking down the aisle. Liam never pressured me about it, never made me feel like I had to walk to make our wedding special. But he also never stopped believing that I could do it. The final year of preparation was the most intense of my recovery. I worked with Liam and other therapists for hours every day, pushing my body to its absolute limits. I practiced walking with various assistive devices, worked on my balance and coordination, and slowly built up my endurance. There were setbacks. Days when the pain was too intense to continue. Times when I fell and had to start over. Moments when I wondered if I was being foolish to chase an impossible dream. But I kept going. I kept fighting. I kept believing. 6 months before our wedding, I achieved something that even my doctors had said was impossible. I walked 50 feet without any assistive devices. It was shaky and uncertain, and I had to rest for 20 minutes afterward, but I did it. I walked. The joy I felt in that moment was indescribable. It was not just about the physical achievement, though that was enormous. It was about proving to myself that I was not broken, that I was not limited by other people's expectations, that I could overcome anything if I refused to give up. Liam cried when he saw me walk those 50 feet. He tried to maintain his professional composure, but I could see the tears streaming down his face as he watched me take step after step without support. When I finally reached the end of the corridor, he swept me up in his arms and spun me around, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. "You did it," he whispered in my ear. "You actually did it." But I was not done yet. Walking 50 feet in a therapy gym was one thing. Walking down the aisle at my wedding was another challenge entirely. I spent the next 6 months perfecting my wedding walk. I practiced in my dress, in my shoes, with my hair and makeup done. I worked on my posture, my stride, my confidence. I wanted everything to be perfect for the moment when I would prove everyone wrong. The guest list for our wedding was small but significant. My family, of course, and Liam's family. Close friends who had supported me throughout my recovery. My rehabilitation team, including Sarah, my first physical therapist, who had become like a second mother to me. And then there were the others. The ones I had specifically invited because I wanted them to see what I had accomplished. Josh was one of them. I had sent him an invitation not out of spite or revenge, but because I wanted him to witness what he had missed. I wanted him to see the woman he had abandoned, the woman he had deemed not worth fighting for, walking down the aisle in triumph. His mother was another. She had made it clear after the accident that she thought Josh was making the right choice in leaving me. She had even suggested that any man who stayed with me would just be settling, or feeling sorry for me. I wanted her to see Liam's face when I walked toward him. I wanted her to see what real love looked like. The morning of our wedding arrived with perfect weather. The sun was shining, the temperature was ideal, and I felt stronger than I had in years. I had slept well the night before, something I had not expected given my nerves about the day ahead. As I got ready in the bridal suite, surrounded by my bridesmaids and family, I felt a calm confidence settle over me. I had prepared for this moment for 5 years. I had worked harder than I had ever worked for anything in my life. I was ready. The dress was everything I had dreamed of. Flowing white silk that moved beautifully as I walked, with delicate lace details and a train that would trail behind me as I made my way down the aisle. The shoes were elegant heels, not too high, but high enough to make a statement. I wanted everyone to see that I was not just walking. I was walking in style. My hair was styled in loose waves that cascaded down my back, and my makeup was subtle but elegant. I looked like a bride, not a patient or a survivor or a miracle. Just a woman on her wedding day, preparing to marry the man she loved. The photographer captured every moment of my preparation, but I barely noticed the camera. I was focused on the moment ahead, on the walk that would define not just my wedding day, but my entire journey of recovery. As the ceremony time approached, I made my way to the back of the church. The space was decorated with white roses and greenery, with candles providing a warm, romantic glow. The aisle stretched out before me, longer than it had appeared during our rehearsal, but I was not intimidated. I had walked much farther than this in my preparation. I could hear the guests settling into their seats, could feel the anticipation building in the room. Through the doors, I could see Liam standing at the altar with his groomsmen, looking handsome in his dark suit. His eyes were fixed on the doors, waiting for his first glimpse of me. The music began. A soft piano melody that we had chosen together. It was not traditional wedding music, but something more personal, more meaningful to our journey. The doors opened, and I stepped into view. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. I heard gasps from the congregation, saw people lean forward in their seats, watched as hands flew to mouths in shock and amazement. But I kept my eyes focused on Liam, on the man who had believed in me when no one else would. His expression was everything I had hoped for and more. Wonder, joy, love, and pride all mixed together in a look that I would treasure for the rest of my life. He was crying, not trying to hide it or wipe the tears away, but letting them flow freely as he watched me walk toward him. I took my time, savoring each step. My legs felt strong and steady beneath me. My balance was perfect, and my confidence grew with each forward movement. The aisle that had once seemed impossibly long now felt like a victory lap, a celebration of everything I had overcome. As I walked, I could see the faces of the people who had doubted me. Josh was in the third row, his mouth open in shock, his own mother beside him with tears streaming down her face. My former doctors were there too, the ones who had said I would never walk again, now witnessing the impossible made possible. But it was the faces of the people who had believed in me that filled my heart with joy. Sarah, my first physical therapist, was openly weeping. My parents were beaming with pride. My bridesmaids were crying happy tears as they followed behind me. When I reached the altar, Liam stepped forward to meet me. He took my hands in his, and I could feel them trembling slightly with emotion. "You are incredible," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "Absolutely incredible." The ceremony was beautiful, but I barely heard the words. I was too overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I had just accomplished. I had not just walked down the aisle. I had reclaimed my life, my identity, my future. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, Liam kissed me with all the passion and love of someone who had watched me fight for this moment for 5 years. The congregation erupted in applause, but it sounded distant and muffled compared to the sound of my own heart beating with joy. But the real surprise came during the reception. As we were introduced as husband and wife, the band began to play our first dance song. Liam led me to the dance floor, and I realized that this was the moment I had been preparing for without even knowing it. I did not just walk down the aisle. I danced at my wedding. We moved together slowly at first, swaying to the music as I found my rhythm. But as the song progressed, I felt my confidence grow. I spun under Liam's arm, stepped back and forth in time with the music, and even managed a few more complex moves that we had practiced in secret. The guests were mesmerized. Some were crying, others were cheering, but all were witnessing something they had never expected to see. The woman they had pitied, the woman they had written off, the woman they had said would never walk again, was dancing at her own wedding. As the song ended and the crowd erupted in applause, I caught sight of Josh in the crowd. He was standing with his hands at his sides, tears streaming down his face, looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not pity or guilt or even regret. It was awe. Later, as the reception continued, several people approached me to share their amazement at what they had witnessed. My former neurologist, the one who had warned me against expecting too much, shook my hand and said, "You have accomplished something I did not think was medically possible. You should be very proud." Josh's mother, the woman who had suggested that Liam was only with me out of pity, took my hands in hers and said, "I was wrong about everything. I can see how much that man loves you, and I can see why. You are remarkable." Even Josh himself approached me later in the evening. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, and there was a sadness in his eyes that I had not seen before. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "The biggest mistake of my life. I should have stayed. I should have fought with you instead of running away." I looked at him with compassion but without regret. "You made the choice that was right for you at the time, and it led me to the person I was meant to be with." He nodded, understanding that there was no going back, no second chances. "I just want you to know that I am proud of you. What you have accomplished is incredible." As the evening wound down and Liam and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. 5 years ago, I had been lying in a hospital bed, broken and abandoned, convinced that my life was over. Now I was married to the man of my dreams, surrounded by people who loved and supported me, having just accomplished something that medical professionals had said was impossible. The accident had not been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of a new chapter, one that was filled with more love, more purpose, and more triumph than I could have ever imagined. As we drove away from the reception, Liam reached over and took my hand. "So what is next?" he asked with a smile. I squeezed his hand and looked out at the road ahead. "Everything," I said. "Everything is next." The people who said I would never walk again were wrong. But more importantly, I had proven to myself that limitations are often just starting points, that the word impossible is really just a challenge in disguise, and that the human spirit, when combined with love and determination, can overcome anything. I did not just stand up from that wheelchair. I soared. And the music of my triumph was louder than all their doubts combined. Thank you for watching this incredible journey of resilience and triumph. If this story inspired you to never give up on your dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories of courage and determination. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to join our community of dreamers and believers who know that with enough faith and hard work, anything is possible. Your support means the world to us, and together we can spread hope and inspiration to people who need it most. Subscribe now and be part of our mission to prove that miracles happen every day.